President, I've spoken on this subject many times here on the floor, but I was taken yesterday in Maputo, Mozambique. Representatives of many of the 161 countries that have joined the treaty banning the production, stockpiling, export, and use of anti-personnel landmines convened the third review conference in the 15 years since the treaty came into force. The impact of that treaty, once ridiculed as a naive dream by many in the U.S. defense establishment, has been extraordinary. The vast majority of landmine use and production has stopped. New casualties have dropped significantly, and many countries have cleared the mined areas in their territories. Of the 35 countries that have not yet joined the treaty, including the United States, almost all abide by its provisions. Now, we can be proud that the United States has been the largest contributor to programs to clear mines and to help mine victims. Those programs have saved countless lives. In fact, the War Victims Fund, the Leahy War Victims Fund, was first used in Mozambique. But I remember during the negotiations on the treaty how officials in the U.S. administration at the time urged, even times warned, their counterparts in other countries against joining the treaty, including our NATO allies, all of whom have joined it. Some in our government said it was a meaningless gesture that would accomplish nothing. And I think they resented that other governments, especially Canada, and non-governmental organizations from around the world could achieve something outside the United Nations negotiation process, which had utterly failed to address this problem. Instead, the treaty's already accomplished more than most people expected, thanks to the extraordinary advocacy of the international campaign to ban landmines, and 3/4 of the world's government, many of whose people have suffered from the scourge of landmines. That's the good news. The bad news is the problem is still not solved. There's still thousands of deaths and injuries from mines each year. And of course, Mr. President, they're not combatants in most cases. They're innocent civilians. Because even when you have a peace agreement between armies fighting each other, they leave, the landmines stay. 20 years ago in a speech to the United Nations that inspired people around the world, President Clinton called for a global ban on anti-personnel mines, and I'm proud President Clinton for doing that. But his presidency, his White House, his administration was outmaneuvered by the Pentagon, and it failed to join the treaty. Then during the 8 years of the last Bush administration, nothing happened. In fact, during those years, the White House reneged on some of the pledges of the Clinton administration. When President Obama was elected, I thought we'd finally see the U.S. get on the right side of this issue. After all, we fought 2 long wars without using anti-personnel mines. All our NATO allies, most of our coalition partners have banned them, but we haven't joined the treaty. Now, we rightly condemn, and I do condemn, the Taliban for using victim-activated IEDs, which are also banned by the treaty. But we still insist on retaining our right to use anti-personnel mines. 18 years ago, President Clinton charged the Pentagon to develop alternatives to anti-personnel mines. Instead, the Pentagon has fought every attempt to get rid of these indiscriminate weapons, even if they don't use them. They say we got to have them in our arsenal. So I've said many times, no one argues the anti-personnel mines have no military utility. Every weapon has a military utility. Poison gas can have a military utility, but we outlawed it a century ago. Are we really incapable of renouncing, as our closest Allies have tiny explosives that are the antithesis of precision-guided weapons, weapons we have rightly not used during 2 long wars, weapons that kill children and innocent civilians, and are weapons that should bring condemnation to anybody who used them. We talk about the importance of avoiding civilian casualties. We all believe in that. And we've seen how civilian casualties can turn a local population against us. We don't export anti-personnel landmines. We don't use them. We say we can't get rid of them. Mr. President, we can drive a robot on Mars by remote control, but we say we can't solve this problem. It begs credulity. Mr. President, this is not an abstract issue. This girl is who I'm talking about. I've met countless people like her. She was lucky. She survived, even though without hands and legs. Many others like her bleed to death. I've been to clinics in poor countries where instead of soccer balls, they make artificial limbs like these. And why? Because they need them. I go there with the Leahy War Victims Fund. I'm proud that we can give them money, but I wish there was absolutely no need for that fund. I visit, as I've said here before, a young girl in a hospital after the Bosnia war. Parents sent her away so she could be safe. War ends, the armies withdraw, peace is signed, she can come back. She runs down the road, calling out to her parents, and steps on a mine and loses both her legs. Some safety. The war is over. Combatants are not in danger. We recently sent people to that area of the world after flooding. Why? Because the thousands of landmines still in the ground were washed and moved around. And school children now face the danger again. Because even though they had mapped where the landmines were, that's where they were before the floods. As in the past, the White House hides behind the neglect of this area by pointing to North Korea. Well, who's not concerned about North Korea? But are we so dependent on anti-personnel landmines we can't develop war plans for defending South Korea without them? I reject that, just as former commanders of our forces in Korea rejected it long ago. Last week, after a cursory 2-minute debate, they inaccurately described the landmines in the Korean DMZ as U.S. mines, which they're not, and that inaccurately asserted, based on an erroneous press report, that the White House is about to join the Mine Ban Treaty, which is not. The House Defense Appropriations Subcommittee, egged on by the Pentagon, adopted by voice vote a prohibition of the use of funds to implement the treaty. They followed the same idea. We still have poison gas in our arsenal. It would be the only country, the only civilized country to have that. The amendment's sponsor even claimed the one thing, the only thing, stopping a North Korean invasion is U.S. anti-personnel mines. Balderdash. Did the Pentagon tell them that? Of course not. I wonder how many, if any, members of that subcommittee have even read the treaty. One would think, 61 years after the Korean War, the Pentagon would not still be arguing that the defense of South Korea depends on tiny, indiscriminate explosives that would also pose a threat to U.S. forces if we counterattacked. It really makes you wonder. This country best armed, the country that spends more money on its military than any country in the world. We have to rely on these little landmines to protect us? Oh, come on. President Obama still has a little bit of time to put the United States on a path to join the treaty, but time is running out. It will require some revision of our Korean war plans, revision that our past commanders have said we should do. But that can be done over time in a manner that protects the security of South Korea and our troops. It needs to be done because without the participation and support of the United States, the most powerful nation on earth, no international treaty can achieve its potential. So I commend the participants at the Maputo Review Conference. I regret the United States is there only as an observer, as it's been since the Ottawa process began 18 years ago. We can sit on the sidelines as though we have no involvement in this. What a missed opportunity. What a stain on the country that should be the moral leader. Now, the next review conference is in 2019, 25th anniversary of President Clinton's speech. What an anniversary would be if that next review conference were held in Washington, with the United States attending as a party to the treaty. At the rate we're going, 2019 is as far away as the 18 years we've wasted have been. Mr. President, I'll speak on this subject more other times, but I ask unanimous consent the June 22nd article in the Boston Globe, the June 23rd article in the New York Times on this subject be printed in the record.
Without objection.